Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. First story. Mothman in the Nicholas County Mountains. Some years ago I would go up to my grandparents for a couple weeks every summer to spend time with them and go to vacation Bible school. They live in the mountains of WV, and you can basically describe that place BFE incarnate. No neighbors for at least every half mile, and it's as peaceful as all get out. I was quite the scary story and horror buff ever since my dad let me watch The Army of Darkness. This led to me being fascinated with everything having to do with monsters and cryptozoology. So when I found out my state had their very own monster, I was all about it. I would look everywhere for signs of something that isn't quite on the cusp of ordinary, possibly to a fault. This would follow me up to my grandparents with me reading my book of urban legends. I was completely ate up with it. The first week went by all well and good, then one night in the second week I had something very strange happen to me. To this day I have no idea what I saw. All I know is it was not normal. While I was there I would sleep on their couch in the living room, which had the back glass door right behind it. In front of the couch was my grandpa's gun case that had plate glass doors on the front of it that would reflect anything behind the couch, and outside the door. Now I want you to imagine waking up in the middle of the night with that field of vision. I had always slept with the TV on to distract me from my mind as I fall asleep. I wake up to the TV off and an engulfing pitch blackness. Half asleep, I look around and my eyes wander to the gun cabinet. In the reflection I see two large floating, crimson ovals side by side. Needless to say I'm freaked out, but I just can't gather the courage to move and look out the door behind the couch. All right. If I'm doing it, I'm getting the hell to my grandma asleep in the front of the house. In one swift motion I jump up and stare. For what seemed like an eternity I stared into those red orbs. Finally a synapse fired and I ran to where my grandma was. Panting, freaking out, confused. For some reason I walked to the window that overlooks the woods across the street. Hesitantly I peel back the curtains to look out. Across the street, in the trees, two red orbs. I am unsure of the amount of time that passed with me just staring at those two blood-red, glowing, oblong spheres when all of a sudden they just shot up into the sky. I woke my grandma up to inform her to what had just happened. She didn't think much of it in her sleep-riddled mind, I guess. I was just told to lie down and go back to sleep. There's all sorts of critters out here. Second story. This story was shared by UE742. There's something in the woods of West Virginia. I have been hesitant to tell anyone about this, but after confiding in a good friend and fellow Redditor, I was advised to post my story here in the hopes it might help others. I recently moved several miles up a hollow in West Virginia from a far more urban area. While anywhere in West Virginia is going to be close to a mountain, I now live in quite a secluded little valley with woods starting all of 20 feet out my back door. Since moving here, I've promised myself repeatedly to make use of local hiking trails and the like to finally whip my geeky self in a little bit better shape. After one trip into the woods I don't think I'll ever be going back. A derecho had just swept through the state and caused massive damage. Trees and power lines were down everywhere. Since my house was going to be hot as hell with no AC and 95+ degree heat, I decided that was the day to finally go for a hike and kill some time while waiting for the power to come on. I told my wife, Sarah, the plan and invited her to bring our daughter, 18 months, along to explore the woods. The heat having sapped any semblance of motivation she may have had, she declined to join me, preferring to stay home with our daughter to splash around in the baby pool. As I was putting on my boots to head out, my wife came inside with a slightly concerned look on her face. She told me she'd just seen some sort of FBI agent or something hanging around behind the pine tree in our front yard. I went outside with her to check it out. I walked all around the tree and found no one there. I called back to the house to ask if she was sure that was where she'd seen him, as I couldn't even find evidence of footprints or anything in the pine needles on the ground. She assured me she had, but she looked even more bewildered and confused. After some gentle prodding, she told me she'd seen his face coming from behind the stump of a branch that had fallen in the storm. Now, I'm a pretty short guy, only about 5 feet 4 inches, but the branch she was talking about was a good 3 to 4 feet above my head. Chalking it all up to a little disaster-inspired paranoia, I assured her there was no one on our property. We made sure neighbors were still home and told them about the guy potentially lurking around, and received multiple assurances they would keep an eye out. With my wife comforted, I left her to tend our little one and headed for the woods. I didn't, but should have noticed a bush at the corner of our house infested with moths. A lot of branches and whole trees had fallen, making the common trails pretty impassable. There was something about the day that kept me determined to keep going. I began to make my own path in the woods between blocked trails, being sure to note landmarks and sun position so I wouldn't get lost. I came upon one clear trail that, after a few dozen feet, was blocked by a highly tangled mass of trees and branches. What was strange was that they did not appear to have fallen, but been more woven together. It was like a natural wall. I stood for a moment, unsure of why seeing this had caused my entire body to break out in goosebumps. The sun must have gone behind a cloud, because it suddenly seemed darker and a little colder. That's when I saw the eyes. Red, unblinking, and definitely inhuman eyes were staring at me from behind the edge of the wall. The face was round and pale. I couldn't see the detail on the nose and mouth, if it even had them. I blinked and the face seemed to disappear. I slowly edged closer, with every sensible bone in my body telling me to run back home. My curiosity vetoed those feelings. There was a climbing vine with flowers on it growing beside the wall, probably why it took me so long to see the face to begin with. Where the face had been, I now found a plain white doll. Its torso, arms, and legs were all much longer than they should be, and the face was perfectly smooth with no detail whatsoever. Attached to the doll was a white card. In some sort of black ink or marker were the words "Beware" with an XD out circle beside it. On the bottom part of the card was an oval with 2 red dots midway up it, a simplistic drawing of the face I had seen. At this point I was honestly pretty scared. First seeing a stranger outside my house, now having some albino weirdo following me around leaving mangled, homemade toys with creepy notes. I dealt a lot when I was younger with people pushing me around, so I wasn't about to let some creep ruin my hike. I told myself I was falling victim to the same paranoia as my wife. We were not able to call for help, after all, with all the lines being down. I decided to continue my hike. I sat on a rock and had some of the bottled water I'd brought with me. My heart started to slow down and I began to feel a little silly for the fear I had been feeling. Clearly some local kids decided to take advantage of the situation and mess with the new guy in the neighborhood. Resolving to find a way to pay them back, I got up to continue my hike when I heard the snap of a twig coming from behind me. Startled, I whipped around and saw the FBI agent my wife had seen not 10 feet from me, standing on the trail. Only I could see now, as my blood ran cold, that he was in no way even human. He appeared to be wearing a suit, but it could just have easily been his skin. Almost 9 feet tall, his arms reached nearly to the ground. His face was perfectly smooth, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, no ears. Despite this, I could feel the intensity of his stare. I was more frightened than I had ever been before. Every fiber of my being was telling me to run, to get away, to do anything in my power to remove this monster from my vision. But I was held to the ground as if I had been glued there. That's when I noticed the blood at his feet, the disturbing mass of rubbery-looking wet tubes that, I realized with a rush of bile to my throat, could very well have been human intestines. I don't know how long the standoff continued. After a moment the paralysis I felt seemed to abate. I thought fast, sudden movement might invite action on the part of the tall man facing me. What action that might be I could not imagine, but I knew somehow it could not be good. With shaking hands I fumbled for the cell phone in my pocket. Though I would get no signal out here, the camera still worked. Slowly, so slowly, I fumbled to hit the record button without taking my eyes off him. I held the phone up and glanced, ever so briefly, at the screen. Nothing but static. But now he, and his gory mess, was gone. My paralysis left with him. I scrambled to my feet and started to run when I realized I had no idea where I was. The wall of woven trees and branches wasn't there, but neither was the path it had blocked. The rock I had rested on to drink my water was not there. As far as I could tell, I was in a completely different part of the woods. I won't lie, at this point I thought I was never going to see my wife and child again. I was being stalked by some insane man in a bad Halloween costume, or worse, a monster the likes of which the world had never, as far as I knew at the time, seen before. After a few minutes of trying to decide what to do, I resolved myself to get out of this, and get out of it alive. Just in case, I typed out a note on my cell phone, long since returned to normal, briefly describing the being I had seen, and making sure my family knew the love I had for them and the regret I had going into the woods. I put the phone in sleep mode to preserve the battery as much as possible and proceeded in what I hoped was the direction home. For a few minutes everything seemed fine. Then I realized I was being stalked. I kept hearing odd noises around me. Every time I would glance in the direction of the noise, I would see that same blank stare from behind a tree or a bush. Only once did I see the being in full again, perhaps 5 feet away. I had briefly stopped in my hike to get my bearings when I had that being watched feeling. When I turned around, I fell straight onto my ass with the tall man within easy reach. But still he did not move, other than to very, very slowly tilt his head sideways. There was a strange whispering noise and a mass of long, fluid-like tentacles sprouted from his back, branching out to the sides and writhing in the air. I screamed. I'm not sure what happened next. I found myself sitting, leaning against a tree, sobbing uncontrollably. Never before in my life had terror so gripped me. I did not know how to react. You never understand fight or flight until you're faced in a real situation like this. I guess I chose flight because I was again alone, again in unfamiliar territory. I looked down at my arms. I began to sob again, unable to help myself. All over my arms were written one word in black ink, over and over again: run. I ran, I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. I didn't know where I was going and I didn't really care. I just wanted to see my daughter, my wife, my mother, any friendly face I could find. My feet pounded in the dirt. The ground was still wet in many places from the storm. I lost count of the times I fell in the mud. I lost track of time. My lungs were burning, my knees were wobbling and about to give out. But the pounding terror in my head and in my heart would not allow me to even slow down. I burst into a clearing and fell again as I tried to skid to a stop. At first I thought I had come again face to face with the tall man. But this was different. Perhaps 7 feet tall, it seemed like an alabaster white man with giant wings, also perfectly porcelain white. The only detail that stood out were the glowing red eyes. We stayed like that for a moment before it walked towards me. I jumped to my feet, ready to run again, when the thing rushed me. Before I could move, it had grabbed me and thrown me behind it. I landed with a very hard thump on the ground. I scrambled to turn over and look at the creature. That was when I realized it was not me it was staring at, not me it was rushing. The tall man had been right behind me. My mind, briefly cleared enough of fear and adrenaline to think, finally recognized the pale creature as the first face I had seen at the trail. The creature that had given me the warning. The two beings stood facing each other for a bare heartbeat. The tentacles came whipping and thrashing from the tall man's back. Again a pause as nothing happened. The wings of the white creature slowly beat the air. Suddenly a tentacle whipped forward, its point driving at the face of the white creature. One of the giant, moth-like wings curled inward and whipped back out, deflecting the tentacle. Not just deflecting it, but shattering it. The pieces of the tentacles wavered and dissipated before they ever touched the ground. I jumped to my feet and gave an involuntary whoop of victory on behalf of my strange, otherworldly protector. This was clearly a mistake. The heads of both creatures snapped straight to me. Tentacles from the tall man darted in my direction. The face of the white creature split open at the bottom and it roared at me, what I took as a warning. It managed to use its wing to deflect the tentacles. It leapt forward, its arms wrapping around the tall man, its wings encapsulating the tentacles. With a shimmering upward rush as if taking off at great velocity, they both vanished. I passed out. When I woke, I had again moved. But now I recognized everything. In fact, I had gone from a few miles in the woods to perhaps a few tens of feet in the woods, just behind my house. I staggered to my feet and made my way home. The sun was setting. I had been gone all day, but only had memories to account for perhaps half that. When my wife saw me, she asked if I'd had a good day playing in the woods. I glanced down. The words were gone from my arms, but my body was still covered in mud. I somehow managed to smile to her, determined to keep the horrors I'd witnessed to myself. I told her the woods turned out not to be for me. Third story. This story was shared by Yui Yardwolf. The Valian, possibly Mothman. Glad to live in Tucson once again. I used to live in a city called Vail, Arizona. For those who don't know, it shouldn't really be called a city. It's more scattered newish housing developments separated from each other by long stretches of 2-lane roads surrounded by huge expanses of desert, with barbed wire fence, spotted on the sides with spiny trees, all kinds of cacti, and some cattle here and there. It's a little desolate, and at night, dead quiet. About a year back, my group of friends started suddenly talking about their sightings of some weird thing out in the desert and near the roads. I told them their description sounded an awful lot like Mothman, only this thing didn't have wings, but they had never heard of Mothman. Although I'd like to know something else is out there and physically see it, I was pretty skeptical. I didn't want to doubt my friends when this had seemed to freak them out so much, but some could be a bit dramatic, so I took their stories with a grain of salt. They thought it was some kind of alien, and our quest for the summer became to find the Valian. Now to the actual story. Later that year, in the middle of winter, these things were far from my mind. After I had moved back into town, I was visiting a friend who lived just where I used to live in Vale. I stayed over pretty late working on a music project. At about 1 to 2 a.m. I left his house to drive about 25 minutes down a long stretch of road back home. I had started feeling fine about driving by myself late at night, and had no worries. Driving about 50 miles per hour, blasting Led Zeppelin, when approaching a cattle guard on a rise in the road, I saw a silhouette. Before I even processed the fact I was seeing something, I realized I had slowed and eventually stopped to get a better look. The cattle guard stood between this thing and me. It was about 10 yards off, more or less, standing almost in the middle of the road, and from how the road was rising, I could only see about from the hips up. It was very tall and humanoid looking, skinny, with lanky arms and skin that looked brownish, leathery, and dry. Its eye seemed reflective, but very dull, almost looked red, but I really couldn't say. I couldn't figure out if it was looking at me or not. Of course, with my luck, there wasn't another car in sight at the time. Now, I'm a fairly tough girl. I'm the strangely calm one in emergency situations. People who immediately panic really piss me off, and I even intentionally subject myself to scary things to desensitize myself. I'm very interested in this kind of stuff, but being stopped in front of this thing, some switch flipped. The instant I saw it, I felt warmth on my cheeks before I realized I was crying. In my head I'm yelling, "G.O. floor it." But I just sit there, staring at this thing, and it stands and just turns to me slightly. I look down at the shifter, not wanting to get near this thing, considering turning around back to my friend's house. I put the car in first gear, looked back up, and the thing was gone. I immediately hauled us back towards my house. The heater was on full blast and I shivered the whole way home. Fourth story. This story was shared by UCIA Herpes. I found a church that worships both Christ and Satan. A couple days ago, for the first time I ate LSD and reenacted the crucifixion with my church. My parents, both lifelong members, also took part. In the place of Jesus Christ, we put the Savior, our infallible leader. No one ever told me the Savior's real name. In our group of over 500 brainwashed fanatics, I had never heard anyone call him anything other than the Savior. Before that day's festivities began, he called me into his personal chambers. As the guard shuffled me through the door, I looked up and saw him. My breath caught in my throat. The effect the Savior had on people was striking. The Savior sat behind a giant mahogany desk, with expensive silver statues of archangels and demons neatly arranged around a stack of paperwork. He continued looking down at a piece of paper, frowning, his brow wrinkling. Then he looked up at me. The Savior had burn scars covering his scalp, the back of his neck and his arms. Folds of shining colloid scar tissue crisscrossed the top of his bald, scarred head. Yet his face was totally untouched. He had striking green eyes. They shone with a muddy radiance. The color of those eyes reminded me of a swamp filled with hidden venomous snakes, some fetid waterhole that hid bones and rotting bodies. His face was aristocratic and chiseled. He had a small, straight nose with high cheekbones. His chin looked as if it were cut from stone, strong and jutting. His eyelashes looked like those of a camel's. The combination of powerful, charismatic elegance and nightmarish scarring marked the Savior, in both personality and appearance. He was the unifier of opposites in the flesh, the Tao, the Brahmin, and the deathless self. "Adam," he said to me, his deep voice booming throughout the chamber. I gave a weak, anxious smile and bowed my head. "Good morning, Savior. Did you wish to speak with me?" I had absolutely no idea what this man wanted. He stood up, showing off his towering stature. He must have been at least 6'6". He nearly always dwarfed everyone around him, except for the freakishly large bodyguards he kept close at hand at all times. "Today is the day, yes?" he asked, giving me a faint smile. I saw his sparkling white movie star teeth through the parting lips. As I stared into his eyes, I started to feel strange, almost hypnotized. Sound seemed far away and everything felt slow. "Today is your initiation into the fold." "I feel weird," I said. He nodded, as if expecting this. "Did you already take the sacrament?" he said, referring to the piece of round flatbread the high priest put in the mouths of everyone participating in the ritual. I tried to say something, but my tongue seemed to cling to the top of my dry mouth. I just nodded. "Yes, I see. The sacrament contains a very powerful substance, Adam. It's called LSD. Did you know that God gave us LSD? He sent it at the same time as the nuclear bomb. It was clearly a message to humanity. God said, 'Here is one path I have sent you, LSD, the path to spirituality and understanding of the divine. Here is the other path I have sent you, atomic weapons, the path to annihilation and incomprehensible horrors.'" After the sacrament had taken effect in the congregation, men dressed in the garb of Roman soldiers dragged the Savior out. He had on a purple robe and a crown made of thorns. Rivulets of slow-moving dark blood ran down his cheeks. The soldiers, speaking in Latin and laughing among themselves, looked at us. Their eyes seemed to flash with an inner light for a moment. I wondered if these were actors, and if so, where the Savior had found them. The soldiers went over a rack of torture tools, looking at various screws, bludgeons, axes, and whips. Finally, laughing, one of them chose a whip with vicious metal tips, an ancient-looking version of the cat o' nine tails. He showed it to the others. They grinned back at him, their eerie smiles seeming too wide, their teeth too sharp and numerous. They beat and kicked the Savior until blood streamed from his nose and mouth. His eyes began to swell shut, and they tied him to a wooden stockade. A particularly brutish, large Roman soldier walked forwards with the cat o' nine tails, grinning at the crowd. His teeth seemed to grow longer, sharper, more and more like those of a predator. Now I knew it wasn't some trick of the drug or the light. His eyes really were turning crimson, a strange inner radiance rippling through them. The other soldiers around him began to transform as well as they tortured the Savior. The whip sliced deep into his back until the bones of his spine and ribs began to shine through the wounds, white and gleaming under all that blood and torn flesh. I looked on in horror. Those bones, so pure and clean under all that mutilation and damage, shone through like sunshine through a parting storm. Finally, after the Roman soldiers had their fill, they pulled the whimpering, bleeding man up to his feet. The Savior looked like a boxer before a knockout. He wavered on his feet, weaving and stepping from side to side, his face a mask of agony. Then he fell. The soldiers laughed, kicking him in the face and neck as he called out for God to help him, to kill him, to make it stop. But no one came. I saw the cross nearby. They dragged him over to it and pulled out the wicked silver nails that would do the deed. The Savior had taught us that the final judgment was near, and that to survive and become gods, we must worship both Jesus Christ and Satan. Not only must we worship them, he said, but we must guide them towards reconciliation. Armageddon was very near, and the only way for the universe to survive was to unify the two long-lost brothers, Jesus Christ and Lucifer, twins born from the primordial Godhead at the genesis of creation. If we could succeed in bringing Christ and Satan back together into one ineffable being, if we could convince them to fuse their divine powers, then we could single-handedly prevent the apocalypse. The Savior called the path to summon angels and demons for power the process. I had seen the effects of the rites many times growing up. Sometimes the summoned beings appeared in human form. Yet their eyes always betrayed their true nature, glowing red or turning black during the sacrifices. Our church never tried to summon Christ or Lucifer directly. We always used emissaries to communicate with the divine ones. After the Savior had died on the cross, his lips changing into cyanotic blue, the demonic soldiers began to pull his body down. A death gasp escaped the Savior's lips, a long, choking wheeze. The soldiers cut the ropes that bound his arms and legs to the great bloody cross. I saw his palms rip in two as the full weight of his body came down on his hands suddenly. The nails inserted through his feet tore through the flesh as the momentum of the falling body pulled against them. The Savior's eyes stared blankly up at the sky, his pupils dilating as death's cold touch annihilated the last of his life energy. I looked back at my parents' faces. They stood directly behind me in the roaring crowd of believers. My parents' eyes had rolled back in their heads, and they swayed on their feet like sunflowers in a light breeze. With the whites of their eyes showing and their mouths hanging open, I couldn't tell if their faces showed expressions of transcendence or of mortal terror. The members of the church cried and wept, formed in a circle around the ritual. Time seemed to slow down. I noticed the way the sky seemed to change colors above us now, flashing with red and orange light. Soon, lightning bolts started to smash into the nearby trees and bushes, twisting and blazing with blinding radiance. I could no longer discern the effects of the drug from what was truly real. The soldiers' faces began to drip and melt, revealing demonic features underneath. Spiraling black horns emerged from their skulls. Pale, bone-white skin glistened on their muscular bodies. Their legs reminded me of those of a rhinoceros, flat and round on the bottom. Their fingers appeared long, twisted and vampiric with claw-like nails the same color as their horns, shining like jet stone. The demons had shed their Roman garb and human masks completely now. They stood around the Savior's body, mostly naked except for some silver armor coverings around their waist and torsos. I saw strange symbols engraved into the metal, symbols from a language I had never seen before. It looked like no written script developed by humanity. The letters seemed to morph and shift before my eyes as they dragged the Savior towards the cave. They stopped occasionally to kneel down and suck the blood from his wounds, their sharp, serrated white teeth turning crimson. Then they threw him in the cave and rolled the heavy stone in front of the opening. Sometime during the night, after all the members of the church had gone back to the compound where we slept and ate, the stone rolled away from the mouth of the cave. The Savior, now completely uninjured and unscarred except for his previous burns, stepped out. In his purple robe, he could have been an ancient emperor. He had stepped over the boundary of death before and come back, but every time, it changed him a little more, ate away at something fundamental like a corrosive acid. But it wasn't until hours later when I found out just how demented the Savior had become over his life, performing these insane occult rituals and drawing forces to our group that he could never fully understand or control. The next morning, the Savior called me into his office. I hadn't slept all night. Whatever drugs they had given me had kept me wide awake. I saw shadows morphing into silhouettes of people, trees reaching out with arms like an octopus, clouds forming together and breaking apart in the blink of an eye in rapid patterns. As I sat in bed with my eyes closed, I kept seeing those grinning demons wearing the masks of ancient soldiers, speaking in perfect Latin. It felt like a movie playing behind my eyelids, a movie that looped and repeated in all the worst and most disgusting parts. "Adam," the Savior said, smiling beatifically at me. "How was your first experience with the divine?" I didn't know what he expected me to say, so I stumbled through a vague answer. "Oh, just great, so beautiful," I said, lying, returning his smile. Yet inside, my heart quivered with anxiety. My hands trembled, and I could barely keep my teeth from chattering. I felt very cold all of a sudden. "How would you feel about expanding your role in the church?" he asked. I shrugged. "Okay, I guess," I said. I actually wanted nothing less, but I knew the Savior was a very dangerous man. "That's perfect," he said, showing his bleached teeth in a wide, reptilian grin. His eyes sparkled with an inner light and fanaticism. "Because we are trying to get a crew together for some very special missions. Yes, I think these are the most unique missions imaginable. I like to call them creepy-crawly missions." The word gave me an impression of a child's game, yet it had some sinister undertones. "What's a creepy-crawly mission?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Well, it's a bit of a game, like hide and seek. We here at the church give our members pure black clothing and some knives and guns and send them out to the world to bring back some fuel for the rituals. They do what they have to do to get inside a house, cutting the screen or reaching up through the dogger door or whatever else gets the job done. Then they just capture the people at the house, tie them up and bring them back here. They are offerings for the Ancient Ones. Some, such as the Angel of Death, will not come without such as these." He paused for a long moment, staring straight into my eyes. "Human offerings, you understand. We cannot fulfill the rituals to bring the Ancient Ones out without human sacrifices." "You're killing people?" I asked, horrified, my mouth hanging open. He gave a wave of his hand at this. "Adam, you have to understand, there's no such thing as death. The only thing that dies with the body is the ego. We are liberating these people to an infinite higher plane. We are allowing their primordial consciousness to return to the oneness from which all things emerged. Everything that occurs in this world is like a mirage in front of eternal, timeless eyes peering out from behind the curtain of reality. If you think about it like that, we are actually helping these people." He gave me a subtle wink. "To tell you the truth, Adam, I have died many times. I have always come back stronger and more powerful than before. Death is natural, it is beautiful. When it comes, it is like a black hole, or the empty spaces between galaxies. It is cold and black, yes, but also infinite and powerful. So can I count you in? Your parents are already planning on attending tonight. I decided I needed to escape the compound as soon as possible. But this was no easy task. There were cameras, security guards, stores of automatic rifles and grenades, and much else besides to contend with. That night, I got out of my bed, putting on extra shirts for warmth. I put on all black clothing and a black hat with black shoes, so as to disguise myself in the shadows. I was creeping out of my room when I saw 3 silhouettes in front of me, standing in the dark hall. I saw my parents, also dressed in all black, both holding knives with curving silver blades and carved opal handles. On the handles, I saw the faces of angels and demons. My father also had a pistol strapped to his waist. The Savior stood next to them in his impeccable purple robes, a smile of enlightenment and peace spread across his proud, aristocratic face. My father had a lunatic expression on his grinning face. My mother constantly trembled, her pupils dilated, her eyes constantly flicking to the left and right. I wondered whether the Savior gave them drugs before a creepy-crawly mission. "Ah, good," the Savior said, "I see you've already dressed for the occasion. We were just coming to check on you, Adam. It is time to prove your loyalty to the church once and for all. It is time to take your first life. It is, I can assure you, a godlike feeling. After all, if God has power over life and death, why shouldn't we, who seek to become like him?" My father nodded along like a puppet, my mother simply trembling at his side, the long, wicked knife clenched tight in her shaking hand. The Savior reached into his robes and pulled out a similar knife. I saw it had an opal handle, finely crafted and glistening like rainbows. He handed it to me, bowing his head slightly and extending the handle out. "Your time has come, Adam. It is time to prove your worth to the church." My parents and another man from the church went on the mission. I drove the car, a dark, inconspicuous sedan. They said I was to stay in the car during the actual creepy-crawly mission, at least for the first time. I was to be the driver and look out, but more importantly, they said I should watch and learn. "The Savior says to grab a child for the ritual," my father said, grinning. "But the rest of the family can be slaughtered like pigs. No witnesses can survive." They instructed me towards a rich area of the city. Soon I was on high mountain streets with suburban homes looking down upon the ghetto far below. This was where the rich people lived, I knew. I could tell by looking at the mansions and the giant swimming pools around every house. My father instructed me to pull over near a secluded, dark house at the end of a cul-de-sac. I parked the car. With a pounding heart, I watched them get out and climb the gates, nimbly reaching up like salamanders and pulling themselves over. A few minutes later, I saw a half-dressed man and woman run out the front door. Their underwear and shirts were soaked in blood. They had deep slash marks on their face, their neck, their chests and arms. Rivulets of it ran down their naked legs and feet. Behind them, I saw 3 dark, grinning silhouettes walking slowly and laughing. I started the car and drove away quickly after seeing the bodies collapse on the lawn. The figures standing over the limp bodies knelt down and stabbed them over and over, dozens of times. That was the last thing I saw as I turned down off the street, hyperventilating, a rising sense of panic overtaking my mind. I quickly got lost. I just kept driving until the car ran out of gas. By then, I had driven for a few hours and somehow ended up in the next state over. A massive state park bordered the town where I found myself. I walked for a while and found a cabin with no one inside. I smashed a window and got in. But I don't know if it is far enough away. I feel like there's eyes running over my back, like the next shadow I see will turn out to be a church member, dressed in all black and waiting for me. Because the Savior has many more fanatics, and he is sending them all out on creepy-crawly missions. And soon, they may be coming to a house near you. Fifth story. This story was shared by Masuziel66. Who will believe my story about Mothman anyways? So I've not been on Reddit for very long. I'm going to be bold and skip the whole throwaway account thing and own this. But I'm definitely not typing this on my computer. I am going to instead narrate this on my smartphone because I'd never want anyone at work to know about this. I will explain why later. But to simply land the plane, I'm telling you I'm narrating this on my phone so that you will forgive any grammar or typo errors. Trust me, typos and grammatical errors bother me more than they bother the average person, as I am a college professor in the Midwest, and it makes me crazy to read papers with multiple mistakes. Seriously, I really do teach. And I promise you that the story is true. And it's about Mothman, if you've ever heard of him. Maybe this is the wrong place for true stories? Nonetheless, my older sister experienced the same thing I did one night during 1975 while traveling on the East Coast. I think I was about 10. That would make my sister 11. I'm telling this story now because it recently came up, again, in conversation. The first time we talked about it was about 5 years ago. I'm not sure why it took almost 35 years to come up in discussion for the first time. Neither of us recall choosing not to talk about what we both saw while parked overnight at a road stop in the hills of upstate New York. Maybe we just forgot? Not long after my mom died of an aneurysm, I was 14 and she was 15. Life from there forward was chaotic and crazy, and I was one sad human being. I digress. So as I said before, my sister and I recently talked about this. We rarely talked until recently, and my sister had a stroke this past February, and it forced her to move back to our home state, and in the same city as me, to be cared for because she is paralyzed. I've spent a lot of time with her since then, just sitting and talking and getting to know her as an adult. Her left side is paralyzed, but she can speak very clearly. So naturally we've been talking about a lot of things having to do with our childhood, and our shared Mothman experience came up once again. All right, I hope I've set the stage to move forward. Back in the 70s, it was not uncommon for people to travel across country each summer in their car or van. So naturally, my parents thought nothing of packing up their 3 children in a basic van with little more than one of those AAA trip tips you could get if you were a member of AAA. We traveled every summer. We'd gone camping in Mexico for a month one year, camping through Canada the next year, and so on. In 1975, however, my parents wanted to cover the eastern seaboard using our van as our means of transportation. We came up the coast from South Carolina to North Carolina and onward up to New York State. That's where it happened. My parents were cheap. Maybe that's not fair to say. My dad was a social worker and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we did things on a budget. Frequently, we would just pull over at a rest area, do our business in nature, and bunk down for the night right in the van. So this one night, we are in the mountains of New York, stopped at a rest area that is basically a dirt and gravel parking lot. It was heavily forested, and we were the only family parked there for the night. If you're wondering how we all fit in the van, my parents were ingenious and strung hammocks for me and my sister. My parents and my baby sister then slept on the floor of the van using sleeping bags. So my sister and I are both laying in our hammocks. It's late and everyone below us on the floor is sound asleep. Our heads are near the rear of the van, so we can see directly out of the front window into the forest. I'm laying there, just looking, when I see two large orange orbs appear in front of the driver's seat. I know that no one is parked there, because I peed in the woods in front of the van less than an hour before. I laid there silently, trying to figure out what the heck it was. I even looked out the rear of the van. We had tie-up curtains in our van, but it was so completely dark out that my parents didn't consider closing the curtains. Now, at this point, I'm not sure if my older sister is sleeping in the hammock next to me. I'm just looking at these orbs, and frankly I'm too terrified to make a sound. I start to make out the outline of a massive head. It looks like whatever it is standing on our front bumper. I move beyond terror and muster the gumption to start to cry. To my surprise, my older sister is awake and starts crying along with me. I begin calling for my mom. Internally, my mind is wondering whether what I'm seeing is scarier than the spanking I'm going to get for waking my parents. For nothing. My mother is not budging, but neither is my dad. At this point I would be okay with my dad yelling at me for waking him up. Maybe it would scare this thing away. I start howling louder, calling out for both of them to please wake up. Both remain sound asleep, along with my baby sister, who is sleeping between them. My sister joins me in calling out to both of them. The front driver's door opens. But the dome light does not go on. Whatever it is, it moves into her car and is seated in the driver's seat. I can clearly see an outline of it, and it turns around and looks at me. I would say that the orbs of its eyes were as big as grapefruits. Bright orange. My older sister and I both react the same. We roll out of our hammocks, almost in sync with one another, and free fall, slamming on top of each of our parents. Neither parent stirs even a little, in spite of being slammed into in the middle of the night. No matter what, I can't wake anyone up. I remember laying next to my mom and crying. And then everything goes blank. My next memory is waking up in the morning next to my mom and practically squishing my baby sister, and being scolded by my dad for being on the floor instead of in my hammock. I am certain nobody woke up that night. But here is the thing: the front driver's side door was cracked open in the morning. My parents accuse us of getting out of the van in the middle of the night to go pee and forgetting to shut the door. I never left that man that night, nor did anyone else. Plus, I am absolutely certain the doors were not only shut, but were locked when we went to bed that night. I don't know what exactly I saw, but I have researched. My best guess is that I experienced what is referred to as Mothman. My sister has told me that she concurs with me. I feel foolish. I am a scientist. Yet I know what I saw. And I am not the only one to have seen what I saw. The first time we talked about it, a talented artistic, older sister sketched what she saw. I know I saw the same thing. That's my story. It's 100% true. I am not a budding young writer, just someone who wants to share her story and hopes that I might gather more information from those of you reading this. So please let me know. And thank you. Sixth story. This story was shared by you, Lugan the Wanderer. The Shadow of Glaston Forest. Each morning, as the dawn mist wrapped its fingers around the sleepy town of Glaston, I found myself drawn to a dimly lit corner of the local cafe. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee and old paper. Spread out in front of me were clippings and notes, each a fragment of the same unsettling narrative, unexplained occurrences in the ancient forest that bordered our town. The rustle of the papers mingled with the low hum of hushed conversations, creating a symphony of the mundane and the mysterious. My sister's disappearance into those woods years ago had left a void in me, a gnawing hunger for answers. As I sifted through the clippings, my mind played over the memories, her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and then the unbearable silence that followed her vanishing. There's more to these woods, something unseen, something everyone's missing, I whispered to myself, a mantra that fueled my obsession. The bell above the cafe door jangled, cutting through my thoughts. Dr. Ilara entered, her presence commanding yet enigmatic. She was a physicist, known in Glaston for her unconventional theories about parallel dimensions and other worlds. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, fell upon my makeshift research station. I see you're diving into the local folklore, Alex. What are you hoping to find? She asked, her voice a blend of skepticism and genuine curiosity. Her question pierced the fog of my thoughts. It's not just folklore, I replied, feeling a surge of determination. There's a pattern here, something unnatural. I need to explore the forest, and I could use your expertise. The words tumbled out, fueled by a mix of desperation and hope. Dr. Ilara studied me for a moment, her gaze piercing through my resolve. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. All right, Alex. There's scientific potential here too. Her agreement felt like a small victory, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness of my quest. As the cafe's patrons murmured and the morning light crept through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor, a sense of foreboding mingled with anticipation settled over me. The forest, with its whispers and secrets, awaited us, and I knew that stepping into its embrace would change everything. But the need to uncover the truth, to find out what happened to my sister, was a force stronger than fear. I gathered my notes, each crinkle of the paper sounding like a step deeper into the unknown. Dr. Ilara's presence, both reassuring and mysterious, promised a journey that would tread the fine line between science and the supernatural. As we left the cafe, the mist outside seemed to beckon, a silent invitation to uncover the hidden horrors and wonders lurking within the heart of Glaston Forest. As Dr. Ilara and I stepped out of the cafe, the cool, misty air of Glaston enveloped us. The town, usually buzzing with the quaint routines of small-town life, felt eerily silent, as if holding its breath. We navigated the cobblestone streets, our footsteps echoing softly, each step drawing us closer to the unknown. I've always felt there was something off about the forest, Dr. Ilara remarked, her voice barely above a whisper. As if afraid to disturb the silence, I nodded, my thoughts returning to my sister's disappearance. It's like the forest hides more than it reveals. I've felt it since she went missing. We made our way to Marcus's cabin, located on the outskirts of town. Marcus, known for his deep connection with the Glaston woods, lived in a rustic cabin that seemed as old as the trees surrounding it. The door creaked open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and eyes that spoke of a life spent in the wilderness. "Marcus, we're planning to explore the forest. There are things happening there, things beyond explanation," I said, the urgency in my voice clear. Marcus's gaze shifted to the forest, his expression turning solemn. "I've always known there's something off about those woods. Count me in." His voice was firm, resolute, the voice of someone who had faced the forest's mysteries before. Our next stop was Jamie's place, a stark contrast to Marcus's cabin. Jamie's home was a hub of technology, with gadgets and screens illuminating the dimly lit room. Jamie, with his youthful energy and untamed hair, looked up from a tangle of wires and circuit boards. "Hey, Alex, Dr. Ilara. What brings you to my tech den?" he asked, a wide grin spreading across his face. "We're going into the forest, Jamie. There's something happening there, something we can't explain. We could use your tech skills," I explained, hoping to pique his interest. Jamie's grin faded into a thoughtful expression. "The haunted forest? Count me in. Sounds like a real-life adventure game." His casual demeanor belied the seriousness of our mission, but his skills were indispensable. With our team assembled, a scientist, a woodsman, and a tech whiz, we stood at the edge of town, gazing into the dense forest that stretched beyond our sight. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, a deceptive calm that masked the mysteries within. "We don't know what we'll find in there," I said, looking at each of my companions. "But we need to find answers. For the town, for my sister, for all of us." They nodded, a silent pact forming between us. We were united by a common goal, each driven by our own reasons, but bound together by the need to uncover the forest's secrets. As we took our first steps into the woods, the town of Glaston seemed to fall away, a distant memory fading into the mist. Ahead of us lay a journey that promised to challenge our understanding of reality and test our courage in the face of the unknown. The forest awaited, its shadows deepening as the day waned, ready to reveal its hidden truths and terrors. As our newly formed team ventured into the forest, the transition from the quaint streets of Glaston to the wild, untamed woods was immediate and jarring. The air grew cooler, the sounds of civilization faded away, and we were enveloped by the dense canopy of ancient trees. The atmosphere in the forest was thick, with a palpable sense of history and mystery. Dr. Ilara adjusted the straps of her backpack, her keen eyes scanning the surroundings. "There's a distinct change in the air here. It's as if the forest itself is alive," she remarked, her scientific mind analyzing every detail. Marcus led the way, his steps confident and sure. He moved with a woodsman's grace, attuned to the subtle language of the forest. That these woods have been here for centuries. "They hold secrets, old and deep," he said, his voice low and reverent. Jamie, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of excitement and nervous energy. He fiddled with a handheld device, attempting to map our path. "This is like something out of a video game. Except, you know, real and definitely more creepy," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. The deeper we went, the more surreal our surroundings became. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches intertwining above us, creating a natural cathedral of leaves and shadow. The path underfoot was no longer clear, twisting in ways that defied logic. Suddenly, a faint, eerie hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. It was an otherworldly sound that seemed to resonate from the very heart of the forest. "That's it. That's the sound from the reports," I whispered, a chill running down my spine. It was the same sound that had haunted the town's tales and my restless dreams. The forest felt like a living entity, watching us with unseen eyes, whispering secrets in a language lost to time. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and moss, and every so often, a distant rustle or snap would echo through the trees, hinting at unseen creatures lurking just out of sight. "We're not alone here," Marcus murmured, his gaze scanning the underbrush. "The forest is home to more than just animals." As we ventured deeper, the sense of unease grew. It was a feeling of being watched, of trespassing into a realm where we were not welcome. But we pushed forward, driven by a need to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within the whispering woods of Glaston Forest. As we approached the forgotten research facility deep within Glaston Forest, its eerie presence was immediately striking. The building, a sprawling structure of concrete and steel, was overrun by the encroaching forest. Vines clung to its walls like desperate fingers, and moss carpeted its once pristine surfaces. The architecture was a mix of stark industrial design and inexplicable, almost alien, elements. Large, rusted pipes ran along the exterior walls, disappearing into the ground or snaking upwards to the roof, which was dotted with odd, dome-shaped protrusions. The facility's entrance was a large metal door, half off its hinges, revealing a glimpse into the dark, musty corridors within. Above the door, faded letters hinted at the building's original purpose, but time and nature had rendered them illegible. As we stepped inside, our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a long hallway lined with doors on either side. Each room we entered was a snapshot of abandoned scientific endeavor. Some contained rows of computers and electronic equipment, their screens blank and coated with dust. Others were filled with laboratory benches, strewn with glassware and old notebooks, their pages yellowed and curling. In one lab, a large chalkboard still bore the remnants of equations and diagrams, the chalk faded but still legible. The air inside was stale and cold, a stark reminder that the building had been devoid of human presence for years. The walls bore the scars of time, peeling paint, cracked plaster, and the occasional graffiti left by past intruders. The floors were littered with debris, broken glass, fallen ceiling tiles, and the occasional discarded piece of equipment. As we delved deeper, we discovered a vast central chamber. Its ceiling soared high above, supported by thick concrete pillars. The center of the room was dominated by a peculiar machine, unlike anything we had seen before. It was a complex arrangement of metal rings and coils, interconnected by a web of cables and conduits. The machine was flanked by banks of old computers and control panels, their purpose long forgotten. Around the machine, the floor was marked with a series of intricate patterns, etched directly into the concrete. These patterns were similar to the symbols we had seen on the exterior of the building, suggesting a connection between the machine and the facility's original purpose. Despite the decay, there was a sense of latent energy in the air, as if the facility was merely sleeping, waiting to be awakened. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the leaking ceiling. Continuing our exploration of the facility, we eventually stumbled upon what appeared to be the main operation room. The door was slightly ajar, creaking ominously as we pushed it open. Inside, the room was a stark contrast to the rest of the facility. It was far more modern, albeit in a state of disarray. The center was dominated by a large, circular console, its screens dark and covered in a thick layer of dust. What caught our attention immediately was a large, fortified glass enclosure on the far side of the room. The glass, though cracked in places, looked incredibly thick, designed to withstand significant force. Inside the enclosure, we could see a tangle of cables and machinery, but it was what lay amongst the debris that sent a chill down our spines. A creature, or what remained of it, lay motionless. It was unlike anything we had ever seen, a mass of twisted limbs and unfamiliar anatomy, its skin a mottled grey. Dr. Ilara approached the glass cautiously. This looks like some sort of containment unit. But for what? Her voice was a mix of fascination and fear. Jamie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly moved towards one of the control panels. "Maybe we can find out more about this thing," he said, a note of his usual curiosity returning. As Jamie fiddled with the control panel, inadvertently reactivating long-dormant systems, the creature in the containment unit stirred to life. It was a horrifying sight, unlike anything we could have imagined. The creature was large, easily spanning the breadth of the enclosure, with a grotesque, elongated body that twisted and contorted in ways that defied natural anatomy. Its skin was a mottled grey, with patches of what looked like scales or hardened armor. The limbs, if they could be called that, were numerous and varied in size and shape, some thick and muscular, others thin and wiry, ending in sharp, claw-like appendages. The most unsettling feature was its head, or what I assumed was its head. It was an asymmetrical mass of flesh with no discernible eyes or mouth, but as it awoke, orifices that looked like gaping maws opened randomly across its surface, emitting a chorus of guttural, clicking sounds that reverberated through the glass. The sounds were erratic, a cacophony of pitches and tones that made my skin crawl. As it moved, the creature's body seemed to shift and change, as if its bones were made of fluid. It pressed against the fortified glass, its body contorting and squeezing into the cracks, testing the strength of its prison. With each movement, the glass creaked ominously, the web of cracks growing larger. The creature's eyes, previously unseen, suddenly appeared, materializing on various parts of its body. They were bulbous and glossy, reflecting the dim light of the room in an eerie glow. They fixed on us, unblinking and full of a malevolent intelligence that suggested a predatory nature. In that moment, the room felt impossibly cold, and a sense of primal fear took hold of me. The creature's presence was suffocating, an oppressive force that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "Jamie, what did you do?" Marcus's voice was a mix of anger and fear, echoing my own terror. Jamie stumbled backward, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. "I didn't mean to." As the sound of shattering glass filled the room, signaling the creature's imminent escape, panic set in. "We need to get out of here, now," I yelled, the urgency clear in my voice. Grabbing Jamie's arm, we turned and ran, fleeing the horrors we had unleashed. Behind us, the sounds of the creature breaking free and the shattering of glass were a stark reminder of the danger we were now in. We raced through the corridors, the once oppressive silence of the facility replaced by the pounding of our hearts and the unknown terror that lurked behind us. As we dashed through the dimly lit corridors of the abandoned facility, the sound of the creature's pursuit echoed behind us. It was a series of thuds and scrapes, a cacophony that spoke of its size and the ferocity of its movements. The air was thick with the smell of dust disturbed after years of stillness, mixed with a strange, metallic scent that seemed to emanate from the creature. Dr. Ilara, her breath coming in short gasps, glanced back. "We need to find a way out, quickly. This place is a labyrinth." The hallway seemed endless, a maze of twisted metal and crumbling concrete. The signs on the walls, meant to guide, were now faded and barely legible, offering little help. Every turn we took felt like a gamble, a choice between safety and further entrapment. Jamie, still in shock from his accidental awakening of the creature, stumbled over debris. I reached out to steady him, urging him to keep moving, stay focused. "Jamie." "We'll get out of this," I said, trying to mask my own fear. Marcus, ever the survivalist, took the lead. "This way," he shouted, spotting a series of service signs pointing towards what we hoped would be an exit. We could hear the creature tearing through the facility behind us, its movements becoming more frantic and aggressive. The sound was terrifying, a mix of growls and guttural roars that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. As we neared what we hoped was the exit, the pathway narrowed, leading to a set of heavy, metal doors. They were partially ajar, leading to the outside world. The fresh, cool air of the forest wafted through the gap, a stark contrast to the stale, oppressive atmosphere of the facility. "Almost there. Just a bit further," I called out, my voice strained with exertion. The beast's thunderous roars and the ominous vibration of its approach sent waves of terror through us. A horrifying amalgamation of nightmarish features, was a grotesque spectacle. Its limbs, a chaotic array of muscular appendages, ended in sharp, claw-like structures that scraped the walls with a spine-chilling sound. The creature's skin was a patchwork of scales and mottled flesh, glistening with a slimy sheen in the dim light of the corridor. Its eyes, glowing with a malevolent intelligence, were scattered across its body, giving it a disorienting and multidirectional gaze. As it moved, its body contorted in unnatural ways, bones clicking and skin stretching, adding a sickening soundtrack to its predatory advance. We were mere meters from the doors when the creature lunged with a speed that belied its size. Its movements were a blur of malice and hunger. Jamie, who was trailing behind, let out a scream as one of the creature's many limbs snatched him, the claws digging deep into his flesh. Blood sprayed in a gruesome arc, painting the walls in a vivid testament to the creature's savagery. "Jamie!" I screamed, my voice raw with horror. I lunged towards him, desperation giving me a momentary burst of reckless courage. But Marcus grabbed me, pulling me back towards the door with a force that spoke of hard-earned survival instincts. "We can't, Alex. It's too late for him," Marcus yelled, his face a mask of anguish and resolve. Dr. Ilara, her eyes wide with terror, was frozen in place, her scientific curiosity replaced by the primal fear for survival. She stumbled backward, her leg catching on a piece of debris. A sharp crack signified a twist or break, and she cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground. With a guttural roar, the creature dragged Jamie back into the darkness. His screams echoed, a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited us if we didn't escape. I reached down, pulling Dr. Ilara to her feet, her weight heavy against me as she struggled to suppress her pain. Marcus and I heaved the heavy metal doors shut with a resounding clang, sealing the creature and our friend inside. The thuds of the creature's fury against the door reverberated through the metal, each blow a grim reminder of the narrowness of our escape. Leaning against the door, we allowed ourselves a moment to catch our breath, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from our veins. But grief and shock quickly took its place, the horror of what had just occurred sinking in. Jamie, our friend and companion, had been taken in the most brutal way imaginable. With Dr. Ilara injured and leaning heavily on me, we began our painful, slow journey back through the forest. Every shadow seemed to hide unseen terrors, and every rustle of leaves was a potential threat. The forest, once a place of wonder and exploration, had turned into a nightmare landscape, filled with the echoes of our lost friend and the beast that hunted within its depths. As we emerged from the forest's edge, the early morning light of Glaston felt harsh and unwelcoming. We were survivors, but our survival came at a horrific cost. The knowledge of what lay hidden in the depths of Glaston Forest was a heavy burden, one that we would carry with us, along with the haunting memories of our harrowing escape. Exhausted, injured, and reeling from the horrors we had just survived, Dr. Ilara and I stumbled into the outskirts of Glaston, the early morning light casting long shadows across the streets. The town, with its quaint houses and sleepy atmosphere, felt surreal, a stark contrast to the nightmare we had just escaped. As we approached the town centre, I noticed Mr. Hawthorne, the old librarian, standing outside the library, his gaze fixed on us. Mr. Hawthorne had always been a figure of intrigue in Glaston, known for his extensive knowledge of the town's history and lore. Today, however, there was a different kind of intensity in his eyes. "Alex, Dr. Ilara," he called out as we approached, "I see you've returned from the forest. Did you find what you were looking for?" His question, laced with an unsettling implication, stopped us in our tracks. We lost someone," I managed to say, my voice hoarse with emotion. "There's something in that forest, something dangerous." Mr. Hawthorne nodded solemnly, a grave expression on his face. "Yes, the forest has always been a place of mystery and loss. But be warned, the secrets it holds are not meant for the faint of heart." Dr. Ilara, leaning heavily against me, looked at him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "What do you mean? What do you know about the forest?" The librarian sighed, a look of ancient knowledge in his eyes. "The forest is older than this town, older than any of us. It's seen things you can't even imagine. And not all gateways lead outward." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Are you saying there are more creatures like the one we saw? That there are more gateways?" Mr. Hawthorne's gaze drifted back to the forest, his expression unreadable. "The forest keeps its secrets well. Just remember, some doors are best left closed." With that cryptic warning, he turned and walked back into the library, leaving us standing there, a myriad of questions swirling in our minds. Dr. Ilara and I looked at each other, the weight of his words sinking in. The realization that what we had experienced was only the tip of the iceberg was both terrifying and compelling. The forest had revealed its dark heart to us, and now we knew that there was more to uncover, more secrets hidden in its shadows. As we made our way through the town, the normalcy of life around us felt jarring. People went about their day, oblivious to the nightmare lurking at the edge of their world. But we knew the truth now. We knew that the shadow of Glaston Forest was more than just a local legend. It was a living, breathing entity, filled with terrors and mysteries yet to be uncovered. Our ordeal in the forest was far from over. It was just the beginning of a deeper, darker journey into the unknown. A journey that would test our courage and our sanity in ways we couldn't yet fathom. Seventh story. This story was shared by you, Darth Vader. CCTV doesn't lie, the Mothman is back. To the streets and the skies of Chicago. blinking between buildings and gliding low over open water. Picking up the odd animal, or child, and dropping it down, down, down until it goes splat against the pavement, hitting so hard its limbs fly off, causing general havoc, and instilling fear into the hearts of those who walk the streets after the last rays of the sun have finally disappeared beneath the skyline. And I tried to help capture it. Him? It? I'll just go with it. Anyway, keyword, tried. Morning, 3 days ago, I saw it, hovering above me, feeding. And by morning, I mean morning, ass crack of dawn morning. So fucking morning that I could still go to bed and get up at a semi-reasonable time morning. I was walking home from a late night out with the boys. Or morning. Whatever. Anyway, I was stumbling home, down Western Avenue. The night was almost over, and I could see that tint the sky gets right before the sun rises, and I stopped to look up, to admire the light gilding the skyscrapers when I saw it. A shape. A weird goddamn shape in the sky between the buildings. I looked around to see if anyone else was seeing what I was seeing. They weren't, because I was alone, totally alone, which was odd for the area I was in. I looked back up to see that the shape had turned and seemed to be looking at me, and I stared right on back, drunk, stupid. It suddenly swooped lower, towards me, like it wanted to see me better, and I held up a hand, shading my face, trying to see it better. And I did. And I gasped. It was a man with enormous wings, and for one wild, crazy fucking moment I thought it might be an angel, a real, live goddamn angel. But then I saw the glowing red eyes, and the dead thing hanging limply from the man's right hand, blood dripping from it, splunk splunk splunk, against the windshield of the car parked on the street next to me. And as it came closer I realized it wasn't a man at all. It was something else, something alien, something man-like, but barely. It was watching me with its beady, evil-looking red eyes, and was chewing, slowly, slowly, like it was savoring the taste. It lifted the thing it was holding and took another rip out of the flesh, and then I heard it, mewling down to me, a weak cry. The thing it was eating was still alive. I turned and ran, hoping that what I saw was just an unspeakable hallucination brought on by too much beer. Next night, I saw it again. At work this time, 23 stories above Chicago. I work as a security guard for some high-tech computer company in the Loop. To be honest, I don't even know what they do. All I know is that it pays decently and offers benefits. But there are times when I'm walking through the building late at night that I think to myself, maybe I don't want to know what these people do. Maybe it's better that way. Still, I always kept a flash drive with me, just in case I ever saw anything incriminating, something I might want a copy of. I was working a graveyard shift, of course, and was the only person in the building, of course. The first few hours went by like a breeze, but I was getting restless in my little room, sitting there, watching all the screens, making sure all the rooms I knew to be empty were really empty. I sighed and turned to look away, but something caught my eye. Something not extraordinarily unusual, but enough to make me do a double take. One of the screens was showing what looked like a static image. Usually one of the lights plugged near the computers up there would throb up bright then die low again. But the image was showing just a faint light. Confused, I stood up and left to investigate. The light was located on the 23rd floor, so I took the elevator to the 22nd, then took the stairs the rest of the way, just in case there was something more nefarious going on and I needed to be quiet. The floor was dim when I entered, nothing unusual. My company likes to save as much energy as they can. I was just getting ready to make a sweep towards the light, when I heard it, a small, sharp noise I've never heard before. Tick 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 tick. My heart throbbed up to my throat as I turned the corner, expecting to see something horrific. There, near the window, was a dark shape, low to the ground, vaguely manlike. Suddenly it moved, and I saw it was a man, and he was holding what looked like a long stick in front of him. He reached out and turned something against his face. And suddenly I realized he was holding a sniper rifle and adjusting the sight. Tick tick tick. I stood by the doorway, scared still, wondering what to do, how he got in, when I heard a voice. It sounded slightly amused. I can hear you breathing. Who are you? What are you doing in here? I'm security. He pushed himself up and turned towards me, the rifle held low in his hands, pointed at the ground. I unconsciously took a few steps back, afraid, then swallowed thickly and said again, "Who are you?" He threw the rifle up onto his shoulder and stood at ease. "To you, I'm Agent 42. Agent 42? Or spooky, I guess. Take your pick. Agent Spooky, 42, okay. I looked him up and down again. He was wearing a balaclava, bulbous spectacles, and light tactical gear, all black, all ridiculous. Printed on the balaclava was the bottom half of a skull, except the teeth were different, longer, like a vampire's. Slung across his back was some sort of axe, its blade glinted in the dim light. An array of weaponry and rope hung from his belt, including a grappling hook, carabiners, and what looked like sticky bombs, but none of those things grabbed my attention. It was what was hanging from his right hip that struck me. Is that a scabbard? He looked down at it, his face totally obscured by the specs and the balaclava, and sighed. Empty. Miss it. Miss it? The heft of it. The absurdity. Yeah, look, I don't know what you're snorting, but you're on private property, and I'm going to have to call the police if you don't leave. Now. The guy laughed and, despite it being muffled by the balaclava, it sounded real and hearty. After the shit MK Ultra did? Yeah, I'm not into drugs. He thought for a moment. Besides alcohol, of course. And caffeine. And maybe the occasional, just cigarette, you know, for the night terrors and the flashbacks. I squinted at him, wholly consumed by confusion, until the thought of my job caught up with me again, and I shined my flashlight in his face, making him grunt and turn away. Who are you really, and what are you doing here? I'm really a super secret agent guy, and I'm here for that. Still shielding his eyes, he pointed at me, and for a split second I panicked before realizing he was actually pointing straight behind me at the windows. Tick tick tick. I turned around, slowly, expecting to see something fucked up, and I did. It was the Mothman. He was holding the severed head of what looked like a human child. He blinked, his red eyes boring into my soul, and, as I watched, he tapped the head against the window again. The mouth gaped open and the teeth hit the glass. A fleck of red-tinged drool dripped out and slithered down the surface. Tick tick tick. Confident son of a bitch, I'll give him that. I tore my eyes away from it and looked back at the man. He was kneeling now, the rifle leaning against the desk beside him, his spectacles on the floor next to his feet. He shrugged off the axe and set it down, gently, then pulled off his balaclava, shoved it into a pocket, and ran a hand through his wood-colored hair. He stood up, grabbed the rifle and said, "Come on." "Where?" "Up. Don't worry, he'll follow. He hates me." The man smiled winningly, then turned towards the elevator. "Should we use the stairs? You know, just in case?" "Fuck the stairs." We stood in an awkward silence as the elevator slowly made its way up and up, towards the top level, where the ceiling was vaulted and there was room enough for battle. The man was checking the rifle, sliding parts in and out, popping bullets from his belt into his pocket for what I assume would be easier access. "So," he said, still looking at his rifle, making me start a little. "Any ideas?" "What?" "I need to catch him, keep him alive. We could build some sort of catapult and launch a missile at it. Except instead of a missile, maybe we could use a net?" The man snorted and muttered, "Catapult," under his breath. "What?" "Oh, I was just laughing at your suggestion of using a catapult. Clearly the superior missile launching system would be a trebuchet. Aren't they, like, the same thing?" The man looked at me dumbfounded, like he might openly slap me or something, and his mouth fluttered a bit as if he was about to burst out in an endless diatribe. Instead, he just shook his head and muttered, "Not worth it, it's not worth it." What's going on?" "Nothing. It's a good idea. But there's not enough time or material." "So, what then?" The man sighed, long and heavy, then said, "Bait." We arrived on the 33rd floor and stepped out expecting chaos, but the Mothman wasn't there. The man didn't seem too bothered, and muttered something under his breath I didn't quite catch. He pulled out a Gerber knife and then pulled up his pant leg and then looked at me, smiling. "Care to donate your shirt?" I'll buy you a drink." Sure, okay. Can I ask you a question first?" "Shoot." "What the fuck is going on? What the fuck is that thing?" "That's 3 questions, but I'm feeling generous. That thing is the Mothman, and we are going to catch him so he stops eating everything." "Oh." Then, with nothing left to say, with most of my logic suspended, I lifted off my shirt and the man took it, then pulled his balaclava out, reached down with the knife and made a superficial cut on his calf, soaking up as much blood into the cloth as he could. He ripped a piece of his pant leg off and bandaged the wound. Job finished, he looked up and smiled at my expression. "Moths," he said, wadding up the blood-soaked balaclava and shirt, "are stupid. Mothman is basically just a giant moth. More moth than man. So, pretty stupid. All he really does is fly at people, stare at them, hover. And I guess murder and eat the occasional animal and, toddler. Oh, and there was that one time when people thought he made a bridge collapse, but nope, just bad infrastructure and good timing on his part. I honestly don't know how he escaped. I'm thinking he didn't, that someone allowed him to escape." "Escape?" "They caught him years ago." "Caught?" A weird, high-pitched song suddenly played out, and I recognized it almost immediately. The man pulled out an extremely thin phone and flicked at it for a second, the light of it illuminating his face, shadowing his features. "Gallagher?" He looked up at me, surprised, then grinned and nodded. "Best game. Just some girls in Colorado. Look, man, if you need to answer a booty call or whatever." The man burst out laughing and said, No, no, no. Just, friends. Probably wondering where I am. This is much more important. Than a threesome? Sure, man, whatever you say. The man, still smiling, shook his head and opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by a tick tick tick. He sighed, slid his phone back into his pocket, then unclipped the rope and the grappling hook from his belt and slid them onto his right shoulder. You know, sometimes I wish they would just give me the go-ahead to fry the bastard, zap him right out of the sky, but no, they need him alive. Here, he held out the rifle and I took it from him with shaking hands. Sorry, he said, pulling out a pistol from his belt, I'll get my crew to fix it ASAP. They're, used to cleaning up after me. What? When the glass breaks, he'll fly inside and try to see what this is. He kicked the blooded wad with his foot. Don't shoot him unless you absolutely have to. You know how to shoot, right? I nodded, unable to say anything. Good. Ready? I nodded again. He fired at the glass. The bullet was blindingly bright, unnaturally bright, and too loud. So loud I didn't even hear the glass break. I squinted, unable to cover my ears since I was holding the rifle, and felt a sudden gust of wind swoop in. I opened my eyes, ready to fight, but there was nothing. Beside me the man said in a low voice, "Wait." And then, after a few tense moments, there it was. The head was gone. Instead it was holding two dismembered arms and swung them around as if they were some sort of sick batons or wands or something. It looked happy. It seemed to finally notice the window was open and approached it cautiously, clearly seeing me and the man standing there waiting for it. But then it saw the blooded wad and whooped in excitement, approaching it slowly. Across the room, the man had started spinning and spinning the hook, holding back until the moment was just right. A kid? A goddamn kid, you bumbling? The man released the hook and it swung in a wide arc, right on target, and all three of us watched it. It was like it was happening in slow motion. And then, like some mutant version of Ganon with enormous wings, the Mothman swung a dismembered arm like a bat, hitting the hook back towards the man so swiftly he had little time to react, and, also, he didn't have a sword to hit it back with. Well, shit, the man said right before the hook hit him full in the chest, flipping him over so that his head smacked against the floor, hard, knocking him out cold. What the Mothman did next still haunts me to this day. It laughed. Voraciously. Like it had never seen anything funnier. Its face crunched up and it bared its two few, strangely pointed teeth, sticking out a bluish tongue that flopped languidly and long from its mouth. And then it said, victoriously, like a child, "Spoopy go bye-bye. Spoopy bad man." It laughed again, dropped the arm, and swooped low, too low. "Hey, dude?" I said, looking over the man, but he was lying prone on his stomach, his head turned away from me. "Hey, guy? Bud. Spooky McSpooks. Wake up. It's right there. What do I do?" I felt and heard it land behind me, the gust of its wings almost blowing me off balance. I turned and saw it in its entirety. It had to be at least 7 or 8 feet tall. Its wings were even larger than that. It had this jaundiced yellow skin that was peeling in places, leaving grotesque bloody splotches across its face. Its feet were not feet, but these weird tendrils that ended in one pointed, nail-less toe. and instead of 5 fingers it had 3, and they weren't fingers but long, sharp claws. "Ha ha ha," it said, looming over me, spittle flying from its mouth. I could see bits of what looked like a child's shirt patterned with tiny red boats stuck between its teeth. "I eat you now. I eat all of it. I never ate it before. They never let me. It tastes good." I bumped into a desk and stopped, remembering the rifle, holding it up. The Mothman hesitated, eyeing the barrel. Then laughed again, like it knew I was too chickens hit to fire it. But I wasn't, and the sound of it cocking ricocheted around the room. It turned to run and bumped against the glass. Then bumped into it again and again. A scream of rage echoed up and out of it as it tried to find the way out. "You can't go through it. And the opening is right there." I blasted the rifle. My aim was off, I was scared, I was shirtless, but it screamed in agony, clutched its left arm, and leapt out of the open window, soaring in an ungainly sort of way into the distance. Behind me, I heard a ruffling sound and looked back to the man stirring awake. "Bravo," he said, sitting up, rubbing his head, then ouch. I kneeled next to him, setting the rifle down. "You okay?" "Yeah, I've had worse. Just dazed. Probably a bit concussed too," he shrugged, then winced. "Also, did you call me McSpooks? Or was that just a bad dream?" I laughed, shakily, then he joined in, and we laughed for a while until I remembered that we shouldn't be laughing at all, that I had just seen a real, live monster, that this man was indicative of something else, something sinister, something shadowy, hidden, conspiratorial. I stopped laughing and cleared my throat. "It got away." "Oh." He rubbed his head. "But, I realized, there's still the tapes, the CCTV tapes. They might have caught something." The man thought for a moment, then opened his mouth, but before anything came out a weird thin sound cut him off. It was his phone again, but it was whistling in a strange, haunting way. He pulled it out and I caught a brief glimpse of the screen. There was a strange emblem on it, an open eye with a many-pointed star as an iris. It blinked. "Really? Now?" He said more to himself than to me, then, "Sorry, gotta run. I'll meet you in Wicker Park tomorrow, after your shift. Bring the tape." Next day, I went to work ready to steal the tape for that guy, but when I got there it was gone. I soon learned that not long before I had arrived, 2 men dressed in black suits had walked in and demanded all CCTV tapes be released to them. They said they were with some agency, that they had the authority. Apparently, the higher-ups immediately caved to their requests and relinquished them. Strange, I thought to myself, twirling the flash drive I always carried between my fingers, super strange. Then again, maybe that guy sent them to retrieve it. Despite that thought, I still made my way over to Wicker Park after my shift and stood waiting by the fountain, checking my phone every so often. After a few minutes, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey! Have the tape?" I turned. It was the guy. He was wearing a pristine black suit. "What? The tape of the Mothbud?" These 2 guys, I think they were your co-workers, they came and took it. Thought you may have sent them. My fuck. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up, a glazed expression crossing his face. His eyes suddenly snapped back to reality and he said, "How long ago was that?" I shrugged. "Hours ago." He looked over towards the horizon. A pinkish hue was being swallowed up into the blackness above, between the skyscrapers. Parked next to the building across the street was a sleek black Nissan GT-R Nismo. He seemed to be looking right at it. "Damn!" "Well," I said, but the man didn't look over. He was still looking at the Nissan. "There's still this. Downloaded it after you left last night, just in case. Or at least tried to." The man looked over, saw the flash drive and grinned, then said, "Well done. There is a problem though. I checked it and it's corrupt, but the file is there. Maybe we can, I dunno, do some fancy schmancy computer wizardry with it. Clean it up? Worth a shot." He held out his hand for it, but I hesitated. "What are you going to do with it?" The man was silent for a beat, looking into my eyes until I looked away. Finally, he said, "You ever heard of a little thing called disclosure?" "What do you mean, what those crazy conspiracy theories are ranting about all the time?" He nodded, but said, "Oh, I wouldn't call all of them crazy." "Yeah? Why's that?" "Between you and me, kid, I've seen some shit. Some bad shit. Shit that would change everything we knew about, well, everything, life, the universe, all that. But even if that were all true, and I'm definitely not saying it is, isn't there a possibility of society, losing their collective, shit? I suppose." I finally, freely, dropped the flash drive into his open palm, then said, "And doesn't the thought of that scare you?" The man nodded, slid the flash drive into his front pocket, and then said in a tired voice, "Yes. But it's the only way." Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions, suggestions in the comment section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.